Hello everybody, this is Bird Brain. We're here. We are nerdy for the birdies. It is almost midnight here on Thursday as the Philadelphia Eagles have successfully defeated the Washington Commanders 26-18 in a very weird game that kind of righted itself by the end of it. And ultimately, we're going to talk about our 5 observations here on the post-game ponder. A lot to talk about, so let's get into it. So, starting off, really my first observation, which you can kind of treat the next 3 as like, this is like a 1, and then the next 2 are like A and B. But I really want to talk about why this game was won. And this game was won simply off of trench warfare. And trench warfare got this game done. And, you know, it's interesting. When draft time comes around and people talk about how he should draft another tackle and whatnot in the first round, and other people poo-poo that idea, this is why. The games like this are why. You know, you want to have a good, strong offensive line and a good, strong defensive line. I mean, the investments just the last few years in the trenches. You drafted Landon Dickerson in 2021. You drafted Cam Jurgens and Jordan Davis in 2022. You drafted Jalen Carter in 2023. You brought in Mekhi Becton. You know, this is just the last few years. You drafted Tyler Steen a year ago. They keep bringing in these guys in the trenches, and they continue to stay strong, and people wonder, how are they so good at it? They added Nolan Smith in the draft. They brought in Bryce Huff this year because this is a team that truly believes in its trench warfare, right? Regardless if you're talking about the defensive line, which we'll go into more detail on in a sec, and the offensive line, which we'll also talk more about. You win in the trenches in the NFL, and we see it so many times that when teams are struggling, they always say like, oh, well, we don't have the O-line to do what we want to do. This was a concern for Washington coming into this game, that their offensive line would struggle, and they did. This was a concern about their defensive line. They got rid of their edge rushers in Montez Sweat and Chase Young. You know, they had some pass rush. They didn't have a ton. And it really comes down to those fundamental factors. And that is the difference on why the Eagles won and Washington lost. So I want to talk now more about the defensive line first. 3 sacks today by the defensive line, Brandon Graham, Josh Sweat, and Nolan Smith. But that defensive line absolutely got after it, and they were just blowing things up. And it felt like, you know, there were some times Washington popped off a few runs here and there, but for the most part, they were just blowing things up on the defensive line. You know, Jalen Carter has been on a tear, and I really apologize because I have not talked about him much the last couple weeks, but he has been really, really good. And it's not showing up in the stat sheet, but the way he's absolutely blowing things up in the middle, it's allowing the edge rushers to eat, it's allowing other tacklers to eat, the linebackers to make plays, and he is absolutely just wrecking things up front. I mean, that 4th and 2 play, you know, Jaden Daniels can't corral the snap in correctly. Jalen Carter just blows the play up in the middle, flushes Daniels out, and Bond and Reed are able to make a play like on the sideline to force him out, and that more or less ended the game right there. And it's those kind of things right there that the Eagles, it's the difference why they continue to invest in this defensive line. Josh Sweat had a great night. I thought he had some great pressure. I know he only had 1 sack, but again, I look at the pressures. I saw him disrupting plays. He was making tackles in the run game. Jordan Davis flashed for me. Brandon Graham, the ageless wonder, continues to do good things. I didn't see Nolan Smith too often, but again, that sack was a really good rep for him. Bryce Huff, a little bit of pressure as well. It's one of those things where, again, this is why they invest in the trenches and they continue to bring guys in. So the defensive line kind of had a nice night tonight. Again, 3 sacks. They had some good stops in the run game. I mean, again, that drive with the 4th and 2, part of that was the defensive line. Jalen Carter, I think he had multiple tackles for a loss in this game, and I have to look at the stat sheet. It's hard to pay attention, but he was incredible, man. I mean, he just had himself a game. The D-line ate as well. And of course, we cannot forget about the offensive line. The offensive line had themselves a really good game as well, especially as the game wore on and they needed to run the football to burn clock. And we started seeing it a little bit in the second half. We started to see Gainwell pop some runs. We saw Saquon pop a couple runs because of some blocks by key offensive linemen. Lane Johnson had a really good block against I don't know who it was against, but he had a good block on the first touchdown run. Cam Jurgens blew up the safety on Saquon's last touchdown run. Absolutely, a good job by him. It just felt like the offensive line as a whole played really well. They did give up 2 sacks, but one of them was on that trick play where it was kind of a double reverse type thing where at that point it's just taking too long. Someone's going to win that at that point, so I don't really blame the O-line for that. But and obviously Becton had the holding, but for the most part, heck, Tyler Steen got in the game for a little bit, and I thought he played pretty well. We welcomed Mailata back as well, but the offensive line, man, if you're wondering why Saquon, as of this moment in time, we'll see by the end of Sunday, leads the league in rushing, this is why. And when you've got a team that can just say, you know what, we can just run the ball today, and we're just going to run it, and you're going to have to stop us. If that's the situation, we can do it. And they protected Jalen well. There's just so many times where he drops back, he gets a clean pocket, he's able to escape, he's able to run, make plays there. And again, it's just these are the reasons why they continually invest. And we have very slowly transitioned this offensive line out. You go back to, a few years ago in 2019, the offensive line was, it was Jason Peters, Isaac Seumalo, Jason Kelsey, Brandon Brooks, Lane Johnson. Lane Johnson's the only guy still here. Jason Peters, he's still playing for some reason. Isaac Seumalo's in Pittsburgh. Jason Kelsey and Brandon Brooks retired. Lane's still kicking butt. And, you got to be really thankful for this offensive line. And the fact that Howie's replaced 4 of those starters over the years, with different players, it hasn't been perfect, but they have done a really good job filling in those voids. And I know I'm excited to see who fills in Lane's void, in a few years from now. If I had any negative point, I'm sure everyone has this negative point too, and I think it's time to start asking a question about Jake Elliott. Jake Elliott has missed 4 field goal attempts from 50-plus yards this season. He had a really bad night. He took 7 points off the board for this team. In other games this year, we've had points taken off because of bad coaching and decision-making and whatnot and turnovers. But 7 points in this game, it got a little close at the end, but it should have really been 33-18. This game should have really been done with, and the fact that the game got even close was because of Elliott missing. I checked the weather. It didn't seem to be windy in Philly, so I don't know what it is. And I'm hoping it's just an off night, but I just wonder, Jake Elliott hasn't had his sharpest season this year. And I wonder if, maybe there's something to that. We'll see. Let's just hope it's an off night. But that does affect decision-making. And it makes me wonder a few weeks ago if maybe he's, nursing something. Against Jacksonville where there was opportunities to kick field goals and they didn't. I don't know. We'll see. He didn't really play his best. But yeah, so we'll see about Jake Elliott. But I just wanted to bring that up. So my last point is really just an overall view. I wanted to talk about the division. And the Eagles now fully control the NFC East. They have tiebreaker against Washington in their back pocket before they have to go down there. That was a big win tonight. And the fact that, this team started off the season 2-2. They were out of the playoffs after a couple weeks. They were the 7th seed. They're now the 2 seed in the NFL. And they have a chance, if they can catch Detroit. Getting the 1 seed this year is massive because the Lions are a very good team, but their one weakness is kind of playing outdoors. Now, not saying that they can't, but it's a thing where they're just not, they don't do it very often. And they've played most of their games inside in very favorable schedules. And my honest thinking is, if this team comes to Philly in January, and it's loud and raucous, and it's rainy or windy or snowy, I like our odds, versus going to Detroit. So that's something to think about. But yeah, the Eagles have really taken control of things, winning 6 straight. They're playing winning football. They're winning in all the right ways. So it's good to see this team's turn around. And now we've got a chance to really run the East this year. So let's keep going. Obviously, we're going to do player of the game. And I'll be honest, this was a tough one to think about because I could think of several players. But I'm going to give it to a player whose night really isn't going to show up on a stat sheet. But we're going to give it to Quinyon Mitchell. Quinyon Mitchell had a task to go up against Terry McLaurin, who at the time of this game was the 3rd leading receiver in the NFL. Terry McLaurin was absolutely shut down. He had one catch on the entire night, and that was on the opposite side of the field, going on the slot against DeJean. They just could not get anything tonight. And the fact that Quinyon has fully earned this Quintanamo Bay nickname, and it's a real shame, because I'm not entirely sure if he's going to win Rookie of the Year. I don't know if he can't, in all honesty, because he just doesn't have the stats. But the fact of the matter is, Terry McLaurin lined up against Quinyon Mitchell on 20 of his 25 routes tonight, with 6 of those in press coverage, and he did not get a single target. And the only target Quinyon gave up all night was just a completion to Zach Ertz, who, I'll just be honest, he had a nice game for Washington, had that crazy 2-point conversion, catching a touchdown, so welcome back to Philly, but you lost tonight, so whatever. But Quinyon Mitchell is playing corner at a level as a rookie that is borderline unfathomable. I mean, teams are not throwing at him. I mean, you play a team with a rookie corner, you pick on him. I mean, take Dallas last week. The Eagles are picking on K'Lon Carson to the point that he had to get pulled out of the game because they just were going after him with AJ too much. And the fact of the matter is you look at Quinyon, he's not afraid, he's going up against McLaurin, he's holding his side down. And he didn't have the flashy night where he got multiple picks or something like that, but he's just that kind of corner where he's going to hold his side of the field. I mean, he's essentially become the CB1 without being the CB1, and look, he's played some good receivers, and he's done a very good job going against all of them, so he's going to be a great piece for this team in the future. But yeah, that was my reaction to this game. So the Eagles get a little bit of a break. We won't be back until the following Sunday, obviously, when we go to the Rams. Anyway, this is Bird Brain. Hope you guys enjoyed being nerdy for the birdies. Fly, Eagles, fly, and see you around.